Hi, friends. Before I get started on this episode, I wanted to take a moment to address the June 24th of 2022 Supreme Court decision to overturn Roe versus Wade. This decision stripped away the legal right to have a safe and legal abortion. Restricting access to comprehensive reproductive care, including abortion, threatens the health and independence of all Americans. This decision could also lead to the loss of other rights. To learn more about what you can do to help, go to podvoices.help. I encourage you to speak up, take care, and spread the word. Hi there, friends. This is Timothy Kimo Brien, your head instigator for Create Art Podcast, where I take my 20 plus years of experience in the arts and education world and help you tame your inner critic and create more than you consume. Are you paralyzed with fear of trying something new or learning a new technique for your artistic discipline? Are you worried that you're going to fail miserably and lose the audience that you've worked so hard to build? Are you just simply afraid of the unknown? Well, today I'm going to talk with you about the necessity of experimentation. And for those of you that are subscribed to the actual podcast, I do have a great guest that can attest to using the experimentation to help his work. So, in this episode, the video episode, I'm going to experiment with something I don't usually do. The For the audio only version, the interview will go first, and then I'll talk about my ideas on today's topic. I'm also using a new tool to help keep the show in focus and on track. So I'm actually practicing. So for those of you that are huge fans of the just the audio only version, I just got done with the interview with Steve Harper, and you can find him at harpercreates.com in all of his links. But today we're talking about experimentation. So why is experimentation scary? Well, it's because it's messy and unplanned. Now, I'm not talking about the happy accidents that occur. Thank you, Bob Ross. I am talking about trying something totally new or trying a new technique in your discipline and putting it out there for the world to see. Maybe, like last month's discussion on creating out in the wild, you're trying to go out in public and practice your art. There's several unknowns. Probably the worst thing that will happen is that the wait staff will tell you that you can't do your art in their business. Maybe, just maybe, your art supplies will get stolen. But then again, maybe somebody sees your work out there and decides to buy all your paintings, books, whatever you have, and you become an instant monetary success. The thing of it is, you don't know, I don't know, and we don't know together. And that can be scary for folks. Maybe it took everything you had to do a painting and you put it out there after years and years of practice in a certain style. And here I come saying, hey, let's try something new. Well, yeah, I am saying let's try something new. But I also want to commend you for trying anything at all and putting it out there. That takes a lot of bravery to do and, put your ideas into the world. So good on you for doing that. Now let's try something new. Now, sticking to the point of this being scary because, you've done things a certain way or you've presented your work in a certain way. By experimenting with a new style or subject matter can lead you to grow in your preferred subject matter. By adjusting your canvas, and I know I'm using a lot of painting metaphors today, but adjusting that canvas and not using the usual rectangle to present your work. Break out of that a few times and see if you can't find something new from a new style or subject that you can use that you're comfortable with. Again, the worst thing that happens is nobody picks up the work. And I doubt that one piece of work using a new style is going to destroy everything that you've worked to build up. Let's take a look at Bob Dylan when he went electric. Yeah, he lost some fans, but that was about 60 years ago. Now, most of you listening to this podcast probably know who Bob Dylan is. Maybe you're even a fan of him. And you got to admit, the old guy is still killing it in the music world and, even the painting world too. Now, I'm not saying to experiment for experiment's sake and boom, you're going to be the next Bob Dylan. He planned this out and he knew there was going to be a risk in doing the electric approach. And yet he still did it. And I would argue that his acoustic music after going electric really benefited from him going electric. Now, there comes a time when you hit a brick wall in your creativity, especially if you don't expand your subject matter or try new things. And I know I'm guilty of that. How many poems do I have of coffee shops and dark haired baristas with a heart of gold? Way too many. That's why I started doing the National Poetry Writing Month, otherwise known as NaPoWriMo, a few years back. Now, it gave me a chance to break out of the corner that I had painted myself in and fuel two of my poetry books. One of my last poems has the speaker as a deep dish Chicago pizza, letting other pizzas know that her man doesn't want them. Yeah, that's quite a stretch from the dark-haired baristas. And when the audiences see a almost 50-year-old white guy on stage performing the piece, they seem to forget for a few moments who I am and imagine if a pizza could talk, what it would say. Now, I also started doing the National Novel Writing Month or NaNoWriMo, and that helped me overcome my block of writing a novel length piece. And before I started on that, I had a master's thesis, which was my longest work to date, at just under 60 pages. Now, trust me, nobody wants to read that thesis unless you're really interested in the Roman Nouveau movement or Marguerite Duras. I am. I like it, but that's not everyone's cup of tea. With experimenting, what experimenting did for me was to release this mental block. And it helped me to go ahead and stop the excuse and write a novel. Now, it did take 2 months of my life, and I'm just under 100,000 words. It's not finished yet, but I really enjoyed the experience. And I proved to myself that I could accomplish something like this if I really committed to the process and did the work. Maybe you're in one of these two scenarios with your work. And I want to encourage you and give experimentation a try. It could be just what you need. When we get stuck on a topic or a subject, experimentation may be what we need to get out of your rut. And maybe it'll give you a new path to go down and, see what lies there. Now, let's talk about failure for a moment because that can be super duper scary. I know that it's on your mind and you're probably saying, Tim, if I try a new technique, it's going to look like a 4-year-old on crack made it. And it might. You're right about that. I look around my studio and it looks like, I paint like a 4-year-old on crack. But the thing of it is it was made by me. And I use the lessons from that work to improve later work. The big idea is to get over the fear of failure. Hey, you are going to fail. Happy? Good. I know you will fail. Everybody fails. And, on your tombstone, you could have that, he or she never failed, but they also never contributed or inspired someone to take up the pen or the paintbrush or the baton. I'm more of a doer than a person who sits by and lets others do things that I want to do. You never know what's going to turn out unless you give it a shot. Hey, you're going to fail, and failure is okay. You tried, and that's what matters in the long run. The real failure is when you want to avoid the real failure you want to avoid is not learning from the failure and being afraid to fail in the first place. You don't have a chance to succeed if you don't try. You're going to fail 100% of the time if you don't go out there and give it a shot. Now realize it's going to be scary, it's going to be uncomfortable, and people like me will be out here ready to hold your hand and go on the journey with you. Trying is beautiful. If it doesn't come out all right, hey, that's fine. Not trying because fear of failure has no redeeming qualities. It's not ugly or beautiful. It's simply nothing. And I don't want you to be a nothing. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is experimentation as growth. And I've kind of hinted at that a little bit earlier, but growth does happen with experimentation. What type of growth will you get from experimenting? It depends on your perspective. When I changed the topic of my poetry, I found new things that I could write about and I could examine what I had written about and change it up. I'm no longer writing about the coffee shop in Abilene, Texas anymore. Um, but I am comparing it to the coffee shop in Fredericksburg, Virginia that I'm at now every Friday night. As a man of almost 50 years, I look for different things than when I was 20 to experiment with my work on. And, I take more chances as an older person um, than when I was just starting out. A funny thing with age, well, it makes me more likely to experiment. And for a few reasons, I've got nothing to prove. I know my left and right limits, and I have more knowledge of what's come before. And I can avoid those pitfalls that I ran into as a youth. And I know it seems counterintuitive to me when I first heard about that thought process. But old folks are more experimental than young folks. It's true. We know where the boundaries are. We know how to break them and still make them understandable versus just flailing around in the world and hoping that something connects. I think the key to this is knowing what came before, educating yourself on your art, and knowing what's going on currently so you can make those experiments hit more than they miss. Well, if you got something out of this episode, hey, I ask you to please share it with a friend. It may be just what they need to hear. If you have questions about the show, please feel free to reach out to me and tell me what you're doing in your neck of the woods. You can email me at timothy@createartpodcast.com. And if you'd like to be on the show, go ahead, reach out. I'd love to feature your work on my show. If you like this podcast, you can check out my other podcast, Find a Podcast About. And that helps you find your next binge worthy podcast and outsmart the algorithm. You can find that at findapodcastabout.xyz. I also run another podcast called Clearly Obtuse, which is where I explore what an avant garde podcast would sound like. And you can find that one at clearlyobtuse.com. So go out there, try something that may not work, tame that inner critic, and create more than you consume. Go out there and create art for somebody you love, yourself. Until next time.